I found as part of another training that I was going through, a national training on diversity and multiculturalism. And it's actually listening with Ting, and I'm going to have my colleague Laura talk about it, but it's really about bringing our whole selves in relationship to listening to someone else and other people. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
So a quick reminder, remember last week we had talked about if you don't want to come out in the video or have your voice come out, put a star on your name. So we're going to go ahead, and this time it's red. You can pass that around. So, okay, so you all read the Ting article, we're hoping? We're hoping. So what's really great about this article that Lupe shared with us is that Sally Wang-Neeson really talks about how in her work as being an ally and social advocate, she has found that this Chinese symbol for listening, in Chinese it's called Ting, so that's why we're calling the concept Ting, right? It's how do we listen with Ting? And so given the icebreaker that just happened right now, how many of you really put into work Ting? Listening with Ting. How was that? I mean, just to really think about how it was listening with your ears, with your mind, with your eyes, and with the heart. So, question about the icebreaker, but open general question for the article as well. What came out from the article? How was it like? What did you think about that piece?
In general, I think it's often that it's the idea of listening not just to what is said, but maybe what is meant and all the cues that go along with that. What's kind of hiding underneath the way people phrase things that you can tell from the way they say something, or the way they move when they say it, or whether they stutter when they say it.
Yeah, so even all the nonverbals that come with that. So there was a hand here.
Oh, I was just going to mirror that. To me, it reflects how I try to be present when I'm working with a student, because often it's a situation where they're uncertain about what they're doing. So it's really important to, be present and listen and watch and, have some of your heart involved in it, because they're giving up some of them to become there.
Absolutely. Okay. So we'll go third, fourth, and fifth.
It made me think about how a lot of us communicate more often now electronically, and how a lot of our students prefer to email us instead of coming in, come in, it's easier to have this conversation in person than, typing it out. And how there's so much, the translation of what's said electronically can be so different than in person. There's tone that you can infer that's not even there. There's mood, things that you're implying that I'm really not. So it just made me think about how can we apply this now, given kind of this, ease of communication that we think exists.
With the email, yeah. Because there is so much that we miss out, right? Like you were, talking about the nonverbals, and we totally miss that out in the email communication. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say that I've been in a lot of places where they really talk about active listening, which always to me feels super forced. It doesn't feel natural to not interact with someone as your form of listening. And so reading this, a lot of it felt more intuitive, and I know that's just a personal response, but I feel like this spoke to me a lot more as a model, and sort of really thinking about hopefully how you try and approach things on a regular basis, just the whole person, not just whatever needs to happen right then.
Yeah, and I really like the fact that you bring up the intuitive piece, because let's face it, some of us are better listeners than others, and that's okay, right? But it doesn't mean that for those of us who aren't good listeners, that we can improve, right? And I think this is what's really great about the way that she describes this piece, is to really get us to think about the different ways in which we can engage with the listening part. Because I know when I've done or participated in trainings for active listening too, it's it almost seems like I get this image of I gotta make my ear really big, or I'm really listening to you, right? But it's no, sometimes it's just really about opening the heart. Maybe it's about really opening my eyes a little bit more clearly so I can really see you, right? So thank you for bringing that up. There was, back here.
I think it takes a lot of effort and work, and it also
Absolutely. It's how do we also engage our minds, right? But in a way in which we're not making assumptions as a person is sharing with us, in a way in which we're not making also prejudgments either, right? And it's such a human thing for us to do that, right? It's so human. So if we can embrace this part of us being like, okay, this is part of my humanness, this is what's coming up for me, even when we're having some really difficult conversations or dialogues, right? It's like, I really don't want to talk to that person, right? We all know what that feels like. I really don't want to talk to that person, you know? But it's like, okay, but how can we still show up and be present, right? Because in a way, what I've learned is that they are our teachers. We learn something from them as well. And so in the context of being able to be allies here on campus, I really liked, you know, what Abby was saying in terms of like, I really just bring myself and open up my heart to really be with the student, because if they're sharing with me, like, I want to be there, and possibly also given what we talked about last week, is I also need to share of myself into the space too, right? It's a reciprocity that just flows really naturally. So thank you. There was just a little quick piece on the Ting article for listening. We, you know, always feel like we can never get too much in terms of how can we improve. And when we thought about, you know, being an ally, that is such like the #1 thing, right? Is that for us to really be really great listeners and bringing ourselves into it. So, so thank you for reading that. Thank you for, you know, sharing in the exercise and for your thoughts and reflections on the article. So we're going to go ahead and transition to the next section, and I'll pass it over to my colega Elisa.